It's 2025, a new year, and the perfect time to turn your business dreams into reality. Maybe you've been tossing around a great idea, but haven't acted yet. Well, Shopify is how you're going to make it happen. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and make your first sale. With thousands of customizable templates, you don't need coding or design skills. Just drag, drop, and go. Plus, Shopify's social media tools help you connect all your channels and create shoppable posts so you can sell everywhere your customers scroll. Managing your business is easy too. From shipping to taxes to payments, Shopify handles the details on a single dashboard, letting you focus on what really matters: growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/audio. Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/audio.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting through my website, emailrevealer.com, or you just get a hold of me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Really excited about our guest today, Max Good. He just came out with a film called The Assassination and Mrs. Paine. Now, this is the story about Ruth Paine and her husband, Michael Paine, who were the landlords, or they lived with Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina Oswald. You hear very little about her. Nothing really in-depth like we're seeing here today, so I was very excited to watch this film. You can get a hold of Max Good at his Patreon, which is The Assassination and Mrs. Paine, Patreon Max Good. Okay. Also, too, he's on Instagram. There's an Instagram hashtag called The Assassination and Mrs. Paine. Twitter is jfkpaine.com. And the website for the documentary is jfkpaine.com. So, Mr. Max Good, are you there?
Yeah, great to be here, Ed. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for being flexible, too, with the timing, because I had a couple little upsets today. Okay, a couple little ups and downs. I really appreciate that as well. Before we get into your film, The Assassination and Mrs. Paine, tell us about yourself. Who is Max Good?
So I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm 44 years old and been making films and working on films for maybe about 20 years. And this is my second feature documentary. My first one was called Vigilante, The Battle for Expression, which came out in 2011. And that film was about anti-graffiti vigilantes. Sort of a weird, obscure subculture. But it was an entertaining, humorous film where we kind of exposed these anti-graffiti vigilantes in different cities. And that movie played on Netflix back in 2012. And I've made some short documentaries, and I went back to school to get an MFA in documentary film, and I started working on this Ruth Paine project at that time in around 2015, and I made a short film, a 20-minute film about Ruth Paine, and it was just way too dense. Her story's too complicated, and it ties into the whole JFK assassination, which is notoriously complex. So I knew I had to make a feature-length documentary around Ruth Paine, and I kept working on that. Took about 7 years total to finish the film and get it out. So it was released last year, and people can find it anywhere: Amazon, iTunes, Google, YouTube, all the Vimeo, all the basic places, or on my website, jfkpaine.com. And I've been studying, reading books about the assassination and other kinds of hidden history topics for, maybe on and off 15 years. So when I heard about the Paines, I thought this is a really intriguing angle on the JFK assassination that most people have never heard of. And
what made you choose the Ruth Paine?
So I read a book called JFK and the Unspeakable by James Douglas. It came out, I think, in 2008, and I read it around that time. And I had never heard of the Paines before. I'd heard the basics about the assassination and the magic bullet, and whether Oswald was a fake defector, and all the big issues you hear about, the Zapruder film and all that stuff. But the Paines, that was a whole other level to this story that I'd never heard about. And, you start learning these facts about the Paines, that the Oswalds lived with Ruth Paine in her house. Well, at least Marina Oswald lived there for a couple months before the assassination, and Oswald would come stay on the weekends. And the rifle was supposedly stored there. Ruth Paine helped him get the job at the book depository. Mm-hmm. She made the call to the book depository to see if they had some jobs available, and told Oswald to get in touch with them. And she was also really important witness who played a role in finding some of the most important evidence against Oswald. And a lot of that evidence was in her house, where the Oswald's belongings, most of them were stored. So Ruth Paine, she seems like a marginal character, and a lot of people have never heard of her, but actually she's very central, and she was the prime witness to the Warren Commission. She was the number one witness they interviewed. They asked her more questions than anyone else by far. And you can read, they asked her something like 5,000 questions. So her testimony to the Warren Commission is really in depth. And she's kind of like the person who knew the Oswalds the most and was closest to them in the months leading up to the assassination. So she's actually a really central player. And then, of course, people are very suspicious that she had some role in helping to set up Oswald as a patsy. And there's, a lot has been written about that over the years.
Yeah, you have quite a bit of new stuff too that I haven't seen before in the film, The Assassination and Mrs. Paine. How did you get a hold of Ruth Paine? Was she difficult to get a hold of?
She wasn't that hard to get a hold of. I found her phone number somewhere, or her email address online, and she lives in a retirement home in Northern California. Mm-hmm. And she's actually very, very open to doing interviews and talking with researchers, talking with, JFK assassination buffs. People send her things to autograph pretty often, and she's usually open to talk to anyone. And I didn't realize that when I first contacted her, and I was surprised she was willing to do an interview. But Yeah.
Yeah, because she doesn't seem to be like a frequent flyer on the conspiracy circuit, you know?
Yeah, she's not, but she is. Usually, when you see one of these network specials about the JFK assassination, they come out every 10 years or so for the the 20th anniversary, the 25th, the 30th, the 50th, whatever. Ruth Paine is almost always one of the voices interviewed in those projects, and so she's been a real important witness, for 60 years. She's been prominent out there telling her story, and her story is always that Oswald did it alone. I was there. I should know. He was somewhat suspicious. He was doing bad things, and all the evidence I saw points to him being guilty. That's Ruth Paine's story, and she's pretty much always taken that line on it.
Now, she comes off in the film as very confident, self-assured. What is her, like the public story of her background, her employment over the years?
So Ruth Paine is extremely intelligent and articulate. She is very educated. She comes from a kind of upper middle class family. Her parents met at Stanford University. She was born in New York City, but grew up in Ohio. She went to college, Antioch College, in Ohio, and later on in life she got a master's degree in child psychology. But she is a very confident, strong person. She doesn't, she's not just some average person, witness who got caught up in this. She's definitely a unique person, and some people are suspicious because she has been so outspoken, and she's so clear about her position that Oswald did it alone, and that her being a central witness lends credibility to that position. And there are suspicions out there that she was some sort of intelligence agent or an asset doing in some role, possibly looking after the Oswalds. Of course, Oswald was this person who defected to the Soviet Union and then came back. He's supposedly a communist, as far as the official story goes. So the officials were keeping tabs on him, and maybe some people think maybe Ruth Paine would have been part of that, or who knows? In some capacity, maybe she was looking after Oswald or working with him, something like that.
Then what was your experience with her? Was she were you intimidated?
I was intimidated by Ruth.
Yeah, I get you.
But the first time I went to meet her, I had read some of this stuff, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I tried to keep an open mind, thinking maybe this is all exaggerated, and this is just some sweet old lady, living out here, and all these conspiracy theorists have created this legend about her, and I didn't know what to expect, but she was always very open and welcoming, very polite, gracious, and she's unflappable. You could ask her any question. You could ask her to point blank, are you a CIA agent? And she's not going to get flustered. She is quite a strong interview subject, and it's also hard to break through her kind of veneer, her toughness, to get any vulnerable moments. I think there are just a couple times in my film, few times, where you might see some vulnerability. She's been interviewed so many times, and she knows people suspect her, and she's just she's a very confident person. I think she worked at one point as a school principal. She might have that kind of a personality. So yeah, as I got to know her better, I wasn't so intimidated. But yeah, she's
Well, some things I learned from your film was her background with the Forbes family.
Yeah. So her.
It's 2025, a new year, and the perfect time to turn your business dreams into reality. Maybe you've been tossing around a great idea, but haven't acted yet. Well, Shopify is how you're going to make it happen. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and make your first sale. With thousands of customizable templates, you don't need coding or design skills. Just drag, drop, and go. Plus, Shopify's social media tools help you connect all your channels and create shoppable posts so you can sell everywhere your customers scroll. Managing your business is easy too. From shipping to taxes to payments, Shopify handles the details on a single dashboard, letting you focus on what really matters: growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it.
Husband, Michael Paine, was a member of the Forbes family. Michael's mother was a Forbes, and his father was a Paine. And so Michael Paine grew up vacationing on this private island off Cape Cod called Nashawn Island, where the Forbes have owned this island since the 1800s. And the Forbes clan, of course, it's old money, New England. They first made their fortune in the opium trade back in the 19th century, but they're diversified into all kinds of things, and AT&T and railroads, and major wealth. So Ruth and Michael Paine are supposed to be just kind of a random couple living in suburban Dallas, who they're liberals, but not communists. Maybe socialist leaning, but patriotic. Ruth's a Quaker, Michael's a Unitarian. They're kind of like ACLU members. But then you start looking into them, and they have all these family connections. They're living in a very small, modest house in Irving, Texas, outside of Dallas, and a working class neighborhood. And yet Michael Paine is rich. He's got a trust fund of hundreds of thousands of dollars in 1963, which is a ton of money back then. I think the house they live in cost $5,000 or something. So you start to wonder what's up with these people.
Yeah, I love how she says, "Oh, there was an account." There was an account,
Sure. Yeah. She's good at kind of deflecting your questions. Yes, they come from a privileged backgrounds. Michael's stepfather was named Arthur Young, and he was an inventor of some of the most important earliest helicopter technology, and he was brought into Bell Helicopter, and where they developed some of the first commercially viable helicopters, and that was a major military contractor. They made the Huey helicopter, which became famous in Vietnam, and Michael Paine was working for Bell Helicopter in the Dallas area at the time, and he even had a secret clearance to work there. So,
Right.
yeah, these people were somewhat connected. We haven't even talked about Ruth's side of the family and her family connections to the intelligence community. So yeah, these are very interesting characters, and not just surface level average people. Once you start delving into their background, there are a lot of interesting coincidences or facts that might make you suspicious.
Let me ask you this: what about after the film came out? What's been her reaction?
So I wasn't in close contact with Ruth. At a certain point, she decided that the film wasn't going in the direction she wanted, or there were some other people who warned her that this film is going to make you look suspicious, and so she stopped wanting to do any filming with me at a certain point. But I had already pretty much gotten all the footage I wanted by then. So I didn't really mess with her after that. I didn't want to offend her or anything, and she is 90 years old now. She was 82 when I started the film. But she's getting up there. She's still very sharp, and I heard through the grapevine that she watched the film, and the quote the person gave her, what she said about it was, "Well done, but powerfully awful." So this is sort of a compliment, and I think she recognized that the film was well made, and it was respectful. It was important to me to make a respectful film and not to just demonize her, like a lot of people have done on the internet. Whatever no matter how guilty you think she is, she's obviously a strong person, and she's been under a lot of pressure, having to deal with all these suspicions or keep all these secrets, if you think that's the case.
I would agree that the film is very well made, The Assassination and Mrs. Paine, and it's a film even for people that are not JFK conspiracists, and it's a lot of I'm thinking about it right now. Most of the films you see by JFK conspiracists, this is not that kind of film. This is something anybody can watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I set out to make something that would go beyond the kind of niche, the conspiracy niche, or the little community of people who are obsessed with the JFK assassination or conspiracies. I wanted this to be something more appealing to a broad audience, and to have a kind of a true crime element where you're looking at this person, you're interviewing them, and you're trying to decide whether they're lying or not. And I thought, that this kind of personalized angle on the assassination would be an entry point for new people, where they might watch this movie where they wouldn't watch some general movie about the JFK assassination because they think it's all been done before and it's boring or it's ancient history. This is still current. She's alive. She can still answer questions, and whether she's lying or not, that's up to people to decide. And I wanted the film to be balanced, and for people who are, it's a very polarized world. Like, either you think there was a conspiracy or you don't, and you think that the people on the other side are crazy or something, or they make up all their evidence out of thin air. So I wanted people on either side to be able to watch this movie without getting pissed off and turning it off, So, I tried to keep it balanced and just sort of provoke the audience to think for themselves. And they, you have to make up your own mind. I present different arguments, different opinions, and evidence, and you have to decide who you think is telling the truth, who's telling the most believable story.
Interesting too, because you did reach out to Marina Oswald, and she came back to you and said, "Don't waste your life on this. It's way too, it's a way too involved." Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really wanted to get an interview with Marina Oswald. I mean, she lived with Ruth Paine.
Yeah.
And at first, for years, she thought Oswald was guilty, or at least that's what she said in public. And then at some point in like the late 80s, she switched and she started saying, "No, I've been reading the books and learning new stuff, and I think Oswald was innocent." So, yeah, I was able to talk to her on the phone. She didn't want to do an interview. She hasn't done an interview for 25 years or something. Everybody making a project about this wants to interview
Sure.
her. But like she said, don't waste your life. The truth will never come out.
Right.
And it's kind of a sad thing to hear, especially after you spend 7 years on a project like this. But it's, on some level it's true, but on another, I think it's important to keep trying to, to raise awareness for this issue. This is still important. If you give up, you might as well just give up on the country for good. So, yeah, I don't think it was a waste of my life, but I understand her perspective. Yeah. It's like there are people who have dedicated their entire life to the JFK assassination, to researching it, writing books. There are people that it's their main hobby. It's their life's work. Even people who are just on online forums, and that's all they do pretty much. So yeah, that's a question. Do you want to spend your life doing that? Some people do. I would like to do other things. I got pretty obsessed with this. I am one of those kind of assassination nerds. I know a lot. I've read a lot of books, but I'd like to move on also.
And how has the JFK community? How have they received this film?
They've been really supportive. All the authors, the researchers, and people who've seen it have been extremely supportive and excited about this film. And I think they're happy to see that somebody who's not, 60 or 70 years old is interested in this topic and making a film that's, got some production values and, aesthetic sense to it. So, yeah, they've been very supportive. I've been to the conferences many times in Dallas and invited to speak and stuff. It's a good community of people. They're all, a lot of passionate people there, and there has been a little resurgence in the interest about this. Oliver Stone had his series, JFK Revisited, in the last couple years, and books are coming out. Documents are still being released by the National Archives. These documents have been getting declassified, since 2017. We were supposed to have all the documents declassified in 2017, but they keep blocking it and trickling a few more of them out. So this story's still alive, and I think everybody should learn a little bit about it. It's worth watching a documentary or two, or reading a book or two about it, because there's a reason this story's still alive, because it's one of the most epic, amazing stories in history. I think people will be telling this story 1,000 years from now.
One of the things I learned in the film, The Assassination and Ruth Paine, and Mrs. Paine, right? This business about her going to Nicaragua, I had never heard that before. Can you describe that to us?
Yeah, so one of the suspicions about Ruth Paine is that she ended up doing some charity work with the Quakers in Nicaragua in the 90s or somewhere around there, and people started to suspect that she was a government agent down there spying on these groups that were helping out the Sandinistas, because of course the U.S. government and the CIA were fighting the Sandinistas by funding the Contras, the Iran-Contra scandal and all that.
Sure.
So, these liberals who were down there trying to help the Sandinistas they had a revolution, and, they were trying to change the country and make it more just and increase literacy and all these programs. So there were people working alongside Ruth who became suspicious of her, that she was taking notes and photos and maybe reporting on the Sandinista, where they were, what they were doing, who was active. Those are some of the suspicions. There's a woman who I interviewed in the film, Sue Wheaton, who's been outspoken about this. You can look her up. There's a story she wrote about this online. So yeah, it's just one more suspicion on top of all the others. I didn't. There's nothing definitive proving that she was an agent down there, but you just take the different sides of the story. You come up with your own conclusion.
And what year was that she was down there?
I believe it was around 1990.
Oh, very interesting. Now, some of the other things was she had discovered a letter that Oswald had allegedly written to some Soviet assassin. When did she discover this? After the assassination?
No, what we're talking about it's been called the Kostin letter, or
right.
The Kostikov letter. And this is something that happened a few weeks before the assassination. This is before the assassination. And Oswald borrowed Ruth's typewriter. This is the story we get from Ruth.
Right.
Oswald borrowed Ruth's typewriter to write out some letter, and he was typing it in her house on her typewriter, and he acted kind of protective, like he was trying to hide what he was writing from her. And then supposedly he left a draft, his handwritten draft of the letter, sitting on the desk. And Ruth says she was curious, and she decided to sort of steal that letter from him, which is odd. Ruth does, she's a Quaker, and she kind of represents herself as being, very, very honest, and not doing anything sinister, dishonest. So this is weird. She steals this letter from him and makes a copy of it, and she plans to give it to the FBI the next time they come out. So the FBI has already been out to check on Oswald at least twice, and he wasn't there. and they spoke to Ruth Paine. So Ruth Paine had a relationship with the FBI, and you can pretty much conclude that she was informing on Oswald to the FBI. I mean, what else could you say if she's stealing a letter he's writing to give to them? I think people should understand that's it's a very strange story. And this letter is a really key piece of evidence. So it's a letter Oswald was supposedly writing to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and he's mentioning in this letter about how he visited the embassy in Mexico City and talked to this particular Soviet agent there, Kostikov, who ends up being part of this Department 13 in the KGB, which is responsible for assassinations and sabotage and, stuff like that. So this letter is very provocative. It makes it look like Oswald is planning the assassination with a KGB assassination expert. And the problem is, I think almost all the researchers out there I've talked to, coming from the conspiracy side, they think this was clearly a provocation, that Oswald either never wrote this note or was told to write it because he was running some sort of operation pretending to be a communist. So, that's, and Ruth Paine is right in the, so it makes you wonder what's going on here. The Soviets actually received the letter, and their immediate reaction was this is fake, this was some provocation. There's somebody's trying to set it up to make it look like we're connected to Oswald, so they can blame the assassination on the communists, and so that's a kind of complex intelligence operation that's going on with the assassination.
Yeah, pretty serious smoking gun to be passing through your hands here. This time in history, to say the least.
Yeah. So, there's no evidence, no solid evidence that Oswald was visited the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. The FBI, there's this phone call between J. Edgar Hoover and LBJ the morning after the assassination. First call LBJ has that morning. And they're talking about whether Oswald went to Mexico City. And Hoover tells Johnson, well, the problem is that we have photos and a tape recording of the person who claimed to be Oswald, who visited the embassy and called the embassy, the Soviet embassy in Mexico City, and it's not Oswald. So something interesting is going on.
Yeah, but Ruth produced all these coins and things to indicate that he was in Mexico City.
Yeah, that he was.
And was that before or after? That was after the assassination, though.
Yeah.
After they had searched the house.
Yeah, so that's weeks after they searched the house.
Yeah.
Thorough search, police, FBI, everybody searching the house on multiple days. This is supposedly where the assassin of the president was spent the night, and where the rifle was stored.
Right.
All his stuff is stored. And then somehow Ruth, and I believe she's with an FBI agent or something when they find this, but this in a drawer, in the room where their Oswalds were staying, they just open the drawer and there's a Spanish English dictionary, there's some pesos and some Mexico postcards. It is a little hard to believe that this stuff was missed in the other searches. And this is, it helps shore up the story that Oswald actually went to Mexico City, because it's kind of important for them to maintain that. If you believe in the official story, that's part of the legend, is that he went to Mexico City, visited the Soviet embassy. He's making some crazy plans, and who knows? You can either say he has no real connection to them, and he's trying to act like he does, or maybe it was a communist plot.
And she also discovers after the search 2 cameras that were associated with the backyard photos of him holding the rifle.
Yeah.
Let the Stephen Avery crowd get a hold of this stuff and see what they'll do with this.
That was my hope. That this movie, that we'd have a whole community of people jumping on the case and trying to figure this out. Why all these other true crime stories, they have this like active community of people obsessed with it.
Yeah, funny how some things are promoted and some things aren't. Some things get elevated and some things don't. But what do you make of that, though? She finds these cameras. That's pretty suspicious, too, as well.
Yeah, the camera thing is very suspicious, that these things pop up also after the initial search. And like the backyard photos, these are, this is about the most important piece of evidence for the public-facing case against Oswald. It's the photos of Oswald with the rifle and a pistol and 2 communist newspapers standing there, supposedly taken by Marina. Those are infamous photos. Everybody probably would recognize them. Those were not found on the first day of the search. They were found the second day. So somehow those are overlooked. And then the camera that took those photos was not produced until later, much later. And then there was even a spy camera, a miniature spy camera. And this is a whole other convoluted story, but a Minox spy camera somehow also was found, was at the Paine house, and there's controversy over whether it was Oswald's or Michael Paine's, but either way it was a spy camera, and it's suspicious no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, interesting. I never even considered that. It could be Michael Paine's. What about now the connection to the General Walker shooting? She was involved in that too.
So one of the big important stories they wanted to tell to make it believable that Oswald was an assassin was that he tried to shoot this extreme right-wing general, Edwin Walker, in a few months before the assassination. So there was this, somebody shot through this guy's window and missed him, and they never found out who did it. But after the assassination, months and months later, they pinned this on Oswald and said, he tried to kill this guy. Obviously, he's capable of killing the president. And Ruth Paine was right in the middle of finding one of the most important pieces of evidence for that, which was this, they called it the Walker Note. And a few weeks after the assassination, Ruth found a book on her bookshelf that was Marina's. This is her story. And it was just some book in Russian of, child care advice or something. And she thought, oh, maybe Marina would like to have this book back. So she passed it on to the Secret Service, who Marina was basically held in custody for a couple months after the assassination, for her own protection or whatever they said. So Ruth handed over this book, and then the Secret Service comes back to her and says, what's this note? We found this note in the book. And the note says some things, it doesn't mention Walker by name, but it says some things that, sound like Oswald was doing something dangerous and he might not come home. It's this note he supposedly wrote to Marina when he went out to try to shoot Walker. So that, along with Marina's testimony, which a lot of people are suspicious of her testimony, of whether she was coerced to say whatever the authorities wanted her to say, because they were threatening to deport her or something. This note, along with Marina's testimony, were used to prove that Oswald made this prior assassination attempt. So things like that. There's the claim that Oswald killed a police officer while he was, immediately after the assassination, while he's trying to escape or something. There's a lot of questions around that too. Most people don't believe Oswald actually did that. Most of the, conspiracy researchers. So, and the same with the Walker shooting. People don't buy it. They think this was a setup. Even if Oswald did it, it was just some staged thing. Maybe Walker was in on staging it for publicity. So there you have Ruth Paine again, right in the middle of finding some key evidence against Oswald.
Out of all your examination of all this with Ruth Paine and Michael Paine, what sticks out at you the most to sway your evaluation?
Well, it's got to be the familial CIA connections. Once you hear that, it's a little hard to swallow. The fact that Michael Paine's mother knew Alan Dulles.
Right.
Through one of her best friends was Alan Dulles' mistress, longtime mistress, and a spy named Mary Bancroft. And so Alan Dulles was invited to come stay on Nishan Island, where, Ruth and Michael Paine also vacationed with their kids. And Ruth Paine's sister was a confirmed CIA employee. She, we have a declassified document showing that she was working for the CIA. Ruth's father worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is a very common cover for CIA agents around the world. And we know at least that he was recruited. These are the, the few documents we have about these people. We know that he was recruited for a CIA covert role in Vietnam in 1957. And supposedly he was not used for that, but if he was close enough to be considered, it means something. So, yeah, Ruth Paine's, her sister's husband also worked for USAID. And of course, the Paines, they met the Oswalds through George de Mohrenschildt. They met him at this party, or George de Mohrenschildt brought them to this party. George de Mohrenschildt was a friend of Oswald who was an acknowledged CIA asset. We have documents showing that he was the CIA themselves, they say, he wasn't an agent, he was just an unpaid informant or something, unpaid asset. But he was obviously tied in with the CIA, and so there are CIA connections all over this story.
No, and not to interrupt you, but we are getting short on time. But in your film, you actually confront her with some documents and you hand them to her, and at one point, she reads it, she reviews it, and she hands it right back to you. And people who have studied read interrogation techniques, that's very revealing. But now, no one has ever confronted. She's never seen those documents before. Before you, Max Good shows up with these documents.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. Ruth Paine is also a student of the assassination. She knows this story back and front. She's very aware of all the details. So it's a little hard to believe she never saw that document before. Who knows? Maybe she just there's some legal reason she won't ever kind of acknowledge that her sister was CIA. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird. Why, obviously for a lot of people, the CIA is the main suspect, as, the entity that would have planned and executed the assassination, maybe in partnership with other elements and like bigger people in the military industrial complex. But here you have the family that Oswald just happens to be staying with has CIA connections. It's a little hard to just dismiss that, just laugh that off like, oh, that's just a funny coincidence.
It is a small world, and coincidences do happen, but there reaches a tipping point. Now, sure. Max Good, as far as the film JFK, the Assassination and Mrs. Paine, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Okay, as far as this film, the Assassination of Mrs. Paine, what would you like to leave us with on this film, and what have you got planned next in a couple of minutes?
Well, I think everybody should watch this film and decide for yourself. I may have made the case a certain way in this interview, but Ruth Paine is also very persuasive, and it is a little hard to believe, that this sweet old woman could be lying to your face, or could be, in denial or naive of the facts. Who knows? But I see people go both ways, and people still wondering after studying this for years, still wondering exactly what her role might have been and what she's being honest or dishonest about. I got a lot of projects, possibly in the pipeline. Not really ready to talk about them publicly. Who knows if it'll be another political or conspiracy-related thing or not. We'll see.
Top secret, like Mr. Trump's bathroom reading material. The film is called, once again, The Assassination and Mrs. Paine. You could find the Facebook group on Facebook. There's a Twitter hashtag, The Assassination of Mrs. Paine. That's on Instagram hashtag, I'm sorry. And on Twitter, it's JFK Paine. And once again, the website for all this, where you could find it, and a very thorough website too as well, very well done as well, is jfkpaine.com. And Max Good, go to Patreon if you want to support the work of Max Good. A very good film here, the only one I've seen. I'm going to check out that graffiti one, the graffiti Vigilante. Check that one out as well. Mr. Good, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great stuff. I really enjoyed the film, man. Thank you so much. Good night.
All right. Bye.